The Accountability Review Board that was conducted by Ambassador Pickering and Admiral Mullen will be proven to have been a cover-up, one of the worst jobs ever done in the history of governmental reporting, didn't even interview the Secretary of State for their report. And how you can do a Benghazi investigation and not interview the Secretary of State and not interview a series of people who were intimately involved in Benghazi, asked to be interviewed, and were declined to be interviewed.
Heard from everyone and invited everyone. So there was a clear indication there that everyone who had something to say was welcome to provide information to the Accountability Review Board. But again, with regards to these stories, to our knowledge, we're not aware of any agency that has blocked an employee who would like to appear before Congress.
I don't see why the ARB wouldn't have interviewed everybody who wanted to be interviewed, everybody who had any connection with the incident at all. So we'll see. Up until now, I would say this is an issue that hasn't gone away, but it also hasn't exploded into a kind of huge, full-fledged scandal. But it has been very persistent, and it hasn't disappeared.
Charles.
Well, I think it's important because the ARB, the State Department administration have clung to the ARB report as to a life raft. And they've also treated it like the gospel according to Matthew, as if anything that's in the ARB is okay. All the questions have been asked, all the questions have been answered. And that appears not to be so. I'm not sure I would accept the view right now that it was a cover-up. I don't see a motive, for example, for Admiral Mullen to conduct a cover-up on behalf of this administration, but it is possible that it was sloppy and incomplete and even cursory. I mean, if you don't interview the Secretary of State, then you are leaving something large out of this. And if it turns out there were people who are material witnesses who could have known stuff that was important, who were turned away rather than perhaps either ignored or there was some negligence involved. But if there was sort of active turning away as a way to protect the administration, then you've got a scandal on your hands.
The talking points and the evolution of them,
well,
and how they, and the deputies meeting and how they kind of evolved was also a big point.
It's always three elements. What happened before, the warnings ignored. What happened after, which is the talking points, in which the Republican report is truly damning. And then what happened during the time. Is it true, as we heard from the special operator who spoke, in camera last week, that there was an opportunity to get rescue, and it was denied. So I think it's always remained the three elements, and those are the questions. And I think Republicans ought to be really careful to ask a question and not give a speech, to listen to the previous question and to follow up. And lastly, to treat everybody kind of an impartial way, looking for information, and being willing to accept human error and not assuming always the worst of motives, to make it a real inquiry into truth and thus take away the argument that it's a political attack.
I'm optimistic about us getting this done because it's the right thing to do. We've seen leaders from both parties indicate that now's the time to get comprehensive immigration reform done. The bill that Senator Rubio and others put forward, I think, is a great place to start. It doesn't contain everything I want. What I'm not going to do is to go along with something where we're looking for an excuse not to do it, as opposed to a way to do it.
How much, and we've talked about the specifics and the concerns about the trigger and the border security, how much of the politics of Republican politics and looking at the map plays into some of this, Charles?
Look, I think it is the reason for the impetus. It was obvious that the results of last election were read by Republicans as, unless you do something and stop alienating American Hispanics, you're never going to win the White House again. So there's been a lot of a return to what I would call the Bush position of the middle part of the last decade, which at the time was not widespread accepted among Republicans. So they are open to it. And I do not think that the main issue, that the resistance among Republicans and conservatives who are resisting this, is about citizenship. It's about enforcement. there is a sense, I think they understand there's going to have to be a path that's going to have to be accepted. But there's also a sense that if you really do have control of the border, it'll be okay because it'll be the last time. It's not going to be like the swindle in 1986 in which enforcement was promised. It never happened. And that's why I think it could be, the bill is not yet secure. It will depend, again, not on citizenship. It'll depend on whether the Democrats show seriousness about enforcement. I'll give you one example. Rubio today spoke about House members who might want to have a double fence. In fact, the one outside San Diego has a triple fence, and it reduced illegal immigration by over 90%. Now, if Democrats object, you have to ask them why. What possible objection could you have? It might be a waste of money, but it's likely to work. It worked in Israel. It works in a lot of places. So I think the Republicans are going to look for indications of seriousness about enforcement. If they get it, they will support it.
This has been a Sunfish production.